using a machine, one of my students can make a sugar of length of 20 within less than a day. That used to take us years and years. So that machine is now placed in over 30 research labs around the world that are using this technology to make their own discoveries. We started that 27 years ago. The idea was to build the chemistry and eventually a machine that can automatically put together carbohydrates. Because my dream was to make all my students and myself unemployed. That we have a computer with design of experiment software that controls multiple pumps with multiple chemicals, that can work 24/7, does reactions, that can analyze, and the data that's analyzed goes back to plan the next reaction. So we call it a self-driving lab. We basically have a lab that with minimal interference by coworkers can do and generate data. And the beauty is that the data that's generated here without human interference always has the same error. So based on that data, we can start to make predictions and use machine learning to predict chemical reactions.
Today I have the honor to meet Peter Seeberger. He is the director of the Max Planck Institute for Colloids and Interfaces and the man revolutionizing medicine through sugar. He's a visionary chemist and entrepreneur, and his innovations range from vaccines to sustainable drug production.
So this here is the basis of all my scientific discoveries. We started that 27 years ago. The idea was to build the chemistry and eventually a machine that can automatically put together carbohydrates. It used to take years to do that, and today, using a machine, one of my students can make a sugar of length of 20 within less than a day. That used to take us years and years. The principle is quite simple. We have a reactor that can be cooled and heated. There are some small plastic beads. On those plastic beads, we are putting one sugar after another. The sugar you put in a coffee in the morning has 2 building blocks. Cellulose, the base material for trees outside, has hundreds to thousands. And we can put together today hundreds of these building blocks utilizing that machine. So from that basic machine, the first one is actually in the German Technical Museum in Kreuzberg, but we won't show you this. I'll show you the latest version now. The latest version is a commercial synthesizer that's actually made by a Max Planck spin-off company called Like Universe. They won last year the Brandenburg Innovation Award. And more or less what's in that machine is exactly the same as on this one. There's a reaction method in here. There are building blocks, there are reagents, and that machine can put one sugar in every 45 minutes. For a vaccine, we typically need between 5 and 10 sugars to make a part of a vaccine, and the products of what are made here can be used for diagnostics. We started diagnostics companies for endometriosis. They can be used for vaccines. We started vaccine companies for hospital-acquired infections, and they can be used for drugs. We started a company that makes antibodies to recognize the sugars on the top of cancer cells. So the idea is very simple. Just make the sugar molecule. But because sugar molecules are everywhere around our cells, we have opportunities to go after many different businesses. That's why so many companies came out of my lab, because with a very simple idea in principle, we could make a base that's used in all these other areas. So that machine is now placed in over 30 research labs around the world that are using this technology to make their own discoveries, and again, are developing this into scientific papers, but also commercial applications. The second claim to fame for me is an even simpler idea. I'll show you that in a second. I'm a chemist, and chemists work like cooks, right? So we usually have a bucket, or in that bucket we do chemistry. And my idea 25 years ago was to say, look, why do we do it in a bucket? Why can't we use a pipe? You think at home of your bathtub. There's a lot of water in the bathtub, but there's also a pipe where water comes through. So why don't we do the chemistry inside the pipe? The advantage is that the amount of chemical inside the pipe is small in comparison to the surface, which means we can take heat out of the reaction much easier. So if it's something that overheats easily, that's less of a problem. It is not as explosive. And if you want to do things like putting light in, for example, it's also much easier. So if you come with me, I show you one other thing.
Oh wow.
So this now here are full systems. They're basically, we have what we call flow reactors, and flow reactors are nothing else but basically a pipe, and we do the chemistry in the pipe. And this instrument up here sort of fulfills my dream. Because my dream was to make all my students and myself unemployed. That we have a computer with design of experiment software that controls multiple pumps with multiple chemicals, that can work 24/7, does reactions that get analyzed, and the data that's analyzed goes back to plan the next reaction. So we call it a self-driving lab. They basically have a lab that with minimal interference by co-workers can do and generate data. But the beauty is that the data that's generated here without human interference always has the same error. So based on the data, we can start to make predictions and use machine learning to predict chemical reactions. The other thing, we use such systems to actually make life-saving drugs. And one of the things we're working on right now is the idea to potentially build remote factories in countries that have no pharmaceutical production, so they can make their own drugs, medications in these countries. Even in Germany, it would be beneficial because Germany used to be the pharmacy of the world. They produced all the medications. Unfortunately, today we import most of our medications, and we think by minimizing the labor involved, we can become more competitive against low-wage countries in Asia that have taken over most of pharmaceutical production. So we think automation of laboratory is not a job killer for chemists, but the opposite, it's actually going to be a job creation. Lots of data can be created, lots of predictions can be made. We think this is going to actually revolutionize chemistry.
And the reason to make like local labs or even production site, is it to optimize logistics, or what's the reason to make it local?
Most countries cannot produce drugs today. Very few countries produce drugs because it's a relatively complex production system. And the idea is a little bit like a fast food restaurant. If you think about it, it's a very specific process by which they make a hamburger or fries. It's always the same. And the person who is in front of that fast food chain doesn't have to know how to cook. They just push the buttons. And that's what we want to do also for the production of chemicals in pharmaceuticals, where you take that technical skill out, because in many countries, in remote areas, there's low skill labor, and that's why many countries cannot produce. So today, most drugs are made in China and India, and for example, South America, Africa, almost no drug production. It would be so much better if they could do it in their own country, because it would create jobs in the country, it would ensure supply security, and of course will also lead to independence. Because what we realize is that more and more certain countries are utilizing access to medication to further their geopolitical interests. If you want those drugs, please do this for me in exchange. And I think for Germany, it would be also beneficial for us to have a stable supply of certain drugs, for example, antibiotics.
Crazy.
Well, yeah, there's always something else to do, okay, for the future.
So my takeaway from the conversation, the interview with Professor Seeberger today, it's like a lesson in life. It's all about passion, and it's all about fun also. And if you are a passion scientist and you identify there's a need for your science, it's worth to try to make a business out of it. But not by the purpose of business, more by the purpose of curiosity and doing good things in life. And one thing is also clear, there's not the right way for an entrepreneur. There are many ways, and you have to find your right way.